In the status quo, children in primary and middle school years are grouped based on their age. However, some children have different competency and intelligence. So, if children are forced to stay and learn with friends that aren't in the same level of competence, it might be harmful for them. Hence why, as the affirmative side of this debate, this House would abolish primary and middle school years that groups children based on age and instead group them by competency and intelligence. In this debate, we're discussing which side can benefit children's learning experiences better, and if we can prove that our side align better with that goal, then we should win this debate. Moving on to my mechanism, how will we implement this motion? Firstly, we will hold weekly assessment to see children's learning progress. If they're deemed to be able to understand more things and keep up faster than their peers in their age group, then they would be moved to the higher level class. And if children are not able to keep up faster than their peers, then they would be put in classes that are lower than their age. And then secondly, we'd also have counseling systems to help students adapt not only with the new learning system, but also to adapt with their environment. For example, when students move to another class, it may be difficult for them to adjust if they don't have any friends yet, and so we will provide a counseling system. Moving on to my arguments, I have 3 points of arguments, and the first one will talk about the urgency. So currently, children are mostly put in classes based on their age group, and while it might be good for children to interact with children their age, it might also be harmful for children who have a different level of intelligence. For example, it might be hard to interact because of their different intelligence, because different competency in interacting, and because children with higher level of intelligence might be able to understand certain jokes or certain way of interacting better, while others of a low intelligence cannot. And so it is harder for them to interact because they don't have the same interest. And in the worst scenario, children who cannot keep up with their studies will be left behind and feel alienated from their peers who understand better, and children who learn way faster than their peers will not enjoy studying as well, because then it would be too easy for them, it wouldn't be challenging, and they would be frustrated in life. And then in the moderate scenario, or in the best scenario, even if children of higher level of intelligence can still tolerate their less intelligent friends, us putting them in the same group would mean that we are limiting their pace of studying. And then even if children of lower intelligence can still keep up, it would be very hard for them. It would still be very hard for them, and so we're not giving them the exact amount of level of studying that they need. So both sides are not ideal, since they hinder children from learning, which doesn't align with our goals, which is why we should implement this motion. With our proposition, children will be able to learn according to their own personal paces, and so they will be able to study better in comparison to in the status quo. Moving on to my second argument, it's a justification argument, which explains why we are justified to implement this motion. So obviously there are some serious problems happening right now, as I have mentioned before, but specifically we're allowed to do this to implement this motion because as primary and middle school students, it wouldn't be as risky mentally than if we implement this in the tertiary education. For example, like mentally wise, students wouldn't be as impacted since they still have a constant exposure to friends, compared to in college where people don't always have the same classes, maybe they take different classes, so students wouldn't be able to actually have close friends. But it's different in primary and middle school since at least they have a lot more time and exposure to constant amount of friends, and they're in the same building 8 hours a day, right? So it should be more okay. Also in primary and middle school, they have less responsibility in comparison to in students in tertiary education, which might have to juggle between studying and work. Meanwhile, in primary and middle school, their only focus, their only responsibility is to study. So again, it wouldn't be as damaging in comparison to other level of education. And then thirdly, my third argument is an impact argument. So if we implement this motion, children who have different capacity and intelligence than their peers are able to actually learn better. It's exclusive only on our side, since in other side, children are forced to study in their age group, and this creates the notion that you should be able to master certain amounts of knowledge after a while. So when you're 15, for example, you should be able to master algebra, but that is not true in most cases, since some students just don't have the capacity to do it just yet. Maybe they need more time to learn certain things, right? So if we continue in the status quo, children will be forced to quote-unquote master in order to go to the next class in the next year. And if they're not able to do it by the end of the year, year, there are two scenarios. For example, A, they might be forced to go on a higher level all the while not being able to actually do it. And this will be dangerous because certain subjects are actually used in the next year. So if they are forced to go without a proper understanding, they wouldn't understand again the next chapter, the next classes, and so they will graduate with having little to no actual understanding of what they are learning, which doesn't align with our goals. And then the second scenario is that they will have to repeat, but in the status quo, it's considered as shameful. For example, when a student is having to if a student have to repeat a year, they will be asked, why can't you do it? Are you actually a problematic student? Etc. So it's exclusive on their side only, because with our proposal, children will be able to learn in their own paces with no judgment. And that is likely because government themselves has promoted for these students to be able to learn in their own paces, be in the classes that actually support them to learn. And with our side, we'll promote children to be able to study healthily and actually understand things better. Moving on to my trade-offs, I have 3 points of trade-off. The first one is that opposition may say that some smart children may not be ready mentally. For example, an 8-year-old studying in an environment of 10-year-old might not be able to adjust well. And if you force children to go on classes with different ages, it might be harmful. But first of all, to that we respond that no, it's not true, since some children are actually not only smart intelligence-wise, but also smart mentally. For example, people who have the capacity and awareness of understanding difficult notions will actually also be capable of interacting with children of different ages. For example, like a 13-year-old that understands advanced math might also be able to adapt to their environment. And then this is also likely because of our counseling system, because then it would help them to adapt. And then they won't feel alienated as well, since in the society usually smart people are considered to be cool. So they will be approached because they are seen as cool, they are seen as smart. People want to be like them and ask them tips on becoming smart, etc. So in contrary to what opposition may be concerned about, they're not going to be alienated. But even if they're not able to interact, it's okay, because we have all the resources to get them back in their feet in no time, like teachers, parents, counselors, etc. But even if in the end they feel like they're not capable of doing so, then it's okay, because there's always an option for them to stay at a lower class instead of going to a higher class, since in our motion it's said that it's based not only on intelligence but also capability. So if they're mentally unready, then they would be incapable of doing tasks, which means that they're not ready to be on higher class. And then secondly, opposition might also say that this will make people want their children to go on classes beyond their age just for the sake of reputation. First of all, no, because our system itself will not allow it, because only students who are capable to actually study and keep up in the long run in the class are allowed to be there. So technically, it's impossible for parents to put their children in a higher class if the students themselves aren't capable. And in the case of parents forcing their children to go out on a school classes or cram school, etc., okay, it might make them smarter, but again, if the students aren't ready yet, even if they're put in the class, there won't be much damages, since of course they would be failing their classes, and then since their mental capacity isn't that good, so maybe they're unable to do group works, etc. And then thirdly, opposition may also say that some children won't be able to graduate if they don't have the will to learn. For example, children with low intelligence might having a hard time, but no, because children and people inherently have a sense of wanting to achieve something, they would still go all out. Even if they don't go out, we have the facility of counselors to manage their motivation. So that is why we are very proud to propose this motion.